Okay, so we're going to have a look at our formal and informal language then. So again, it's another type of question that will always pop up on the level 1 and level 2 exam. And in regards to the topics that we're going to review, essentially it is very, very similar to our facts and opinions. We're going to just look at, well, what is formal language? What is informal language? How do we spot this? And what does it look like in the exam? And how do they ask us? So it's quite a short unit. But again, having that extra understanding, that extra bit of knowledge can just be very, very useful. We're then going to have a look at the homework, which is for us to complete the assessment on this subtopic. So formal and informal language then. So we may be asked to state if a piece of text is formal or informal. Although there are several kind of differences between these styles and ways to spot them, I always just think it's easiest to kind of have just a little bit of a stereotype in your head and just imagine what the writer might look like. So if I see someone speaking formally, I'll imagine someone like this on the left. I'll imagine, someone with a monocle there, maybe a top hat. And, if I were to ask both of these guys, how was breakfast? You can imagine that they'd probably reply quite differently. And again, it is a bit of a, we are stereotyping here a little bit. Our friend on the right there might be incredibly academic, but it's just something that helps me a little bit. So, our friend on the left here, the breakfast was simply a banquet of the finest cuisine, to which I was most fond. Very posh, very formal. Our friend on the right here, yeah, it was pretty decent, to be honest. I liked it. So again, you can see that there is a big difference in vocabulary here. So our left example there is formal language. Our right example is informal language. Now, again, as much as we are looking at this topic to help us primarily with our reading aspect of the course, it is also very, very useful to know where these differences are and how to spot them for our writing aspect as well. When we're writing to different audiences or writing in different styles, we will tend to adapt or change between our tone as well. So whether or not we are formal or informal. Okay, so let's look at formal language then. So why do we use formal language? We use this to convey a serious tone, and it's for important topics. Where do we tend to see this? It tends to be obviously in newspapers, published articles, academic papers. And again, you would tend to use considerably more formal language if you're talking to someone of maybe like a higher status as well. So if you met the Queen, you'd probably speak a bit more formally. But again, this can apply for emails and letters as well. If I'm emailing a friend, I might use a bit more slang, a bit more kind of colloquial language. If I'm emailing my boss or if I'm emailing a job interview or writing a letter about a job interview or something to this effect, then I'm going to use more formal language there. So how to recognize it? So structures like "it is thought that," kind of slightly longer, more complex sentences here. One really good way of spotting these is that they do not use contractions. So again, what we have here is, so we've got the contraction "don't," which is a shortened, kind of shortened or combination of the two words "do not." So in formal language, you will see the full "do not." So I do not, whatever it might be, as opposed to using "don't." It would be the same with "cannot" and "can't," "should not" and "shouldn't," things like this. So if you see contractions, you can almost immediately assume that it's a more informal piece of writing. You will see more kind of technical or academic language. Pharmacological, just a random word that's thrown in there. Substrata. You'll see these kind of more technically based words. Maybe like quoting of statistics, things like this. And again, just words that you wouldn't see in everyday conversation. It's not very often that I'm talking to a friend and I start talking about the pharmacological studies that were that were done in this country or where they were. And again, in that regard, it's the replacing of very common vocabulary as well. instead of saying, I really liked this, I could say, this was considerably more enjoyable. So changing really to considerably, instead of saying things like, you know, I have a lot of money. There is an abundance of money. So again, it's just changing these words for slightly less common vocabulary, so to say. It's also the idea of there is constant, it doesn't have to be, but there is frequently a use of an impersonal kind of tone here as well. So the impersonal tone in this case would be like, you know, water was boiled, not I boiled the water. So water was boiled to make the tea. That sounds a lot more formal than I boiled some water to make some tea. You can see there again where this is, you know, so the impersonal tone tends to hint more towards a formal language. So in regards to our informal language then, it's used for less serious texts and it appeals to more of the mass market. So we might see this in kind of more tabloid publications, on the internet, in magazines, text messages, or personal kind of written communications with friends or people of a similar social status as well. So it's the more common kind of language that we tend to use. And again, in regards to how to recognize it, it's essentially everything that isn't formal is therefore informal. So more easy to understand and accessible language. There will be kind of colloquialisms and slang as well. So words, you know, oh, that's great, cool, you know, things like this. And it will use shorter and simpler sentences. So yeah, it was really good. As opposed to, I found it to be quite enjoyable. You know, instead of things that it's shorter sentences just to get the information across. We're not trying to impress anyone. We're just trying to get the information across. It can have more of a personal style as well. So we went to Greece last year. You know, it gives you the information. It's a short sentence, and again, it is a more personal tone. It commonly uses the first person perspective as well. Again, it will use contractions, as we can see there. So instead of we will, we can have will. So which is which then? So I can't wait to start my apprenticeship course next year. I think the whole experience will be fantastic. It's in Birmingham. I think I'll pass with flying colours. So this is going to be an example of an informal piece. And we can tell this because it's got some short sentences in there. Like, you know, I think the whole experience will be fantastic. It's in Birmingham. I think I'll pass with flying colours. It's got the colloquial language there. Like, yeah, it'll be fantastic. Pass with flying colours. So again, an idiom used there as well. It has also got some contractions in there. I can't wait. So as opposed to I cannot wait. And again, it is written in personal form, but again, it's not necessarily it being personal, which is the determining factor as to whether or not this is formal or informal. So then we've got our next idea here. So we've got over 10,000 apprenticeships will be funded by the government starting from next year. Locations will be as far-reaching as Cardiff, Glasgow, and Birmingham. So this is an example of a more formal piece of writing, and we can tell this in several ways. So we've got some of these longer used words here. So you know, funded, you know, far-reaching as well is a less commonly used piece of language there. There are no contractions in there at all. We've got the use of statistics, so quoting something, which again tends to be used in more formal or academic writing. And again, the sentences themselves are longer and more complex as well. So if you can't see immediately, you know, well, what are the formal aspects here? You can then just kind of look at it and be like, well, what are the things that would make it informal? So if the informal aspects are missing, it therefore means it's formal. So sometimes you might spot the formal aspects and go, well, therefore it is formal, or you might see the lack of informal. And this can be used in reverse as well. So if you're looking at an informal piece, you could view it and think, well, this is it's informal because I can see informal pieces, or because you cannot see any of the formal pieces there. So as another idea here then, so what we have is a letter here, and we're just going to go through and just kind of show and highlight why this is very informal. So if we give it a quick read first of all, so I've got hi, heard about the job, reckon I would be great at it. I've done that kind of work before, working in my local, and think pub work is buzzing. They even trusted me with the readies. Like, I was a cleaner before that, but that was gross and I don't want to do that again. Give us a chance, ring me on this number. So again, you can already tell straight away, this is very, very informal and a lot of colloquial language in there. I'm hoping if you ever were looking for a job that you would definitely not send a letter or an email like this. But just to highlight certain things, you know, if we did want to send this message and we wanted to apply for a certain job, if we were writing this in a letter format, obviously, we're going to have a more formal greeting than just hi. You know what I mean? We would start with, dear sir or madam, and we'll look at this when we look at our writing styles and how to compose letters in the future, and when we would change between informal and formal. We're writing for a purpose here. So again, if this was more formal, there'd be more of an introduction here, kind of saying, I am writing to inform, or I'm writing regarding. So we'd see more of these less commonly used words, which are more academic words, not the less common slang words, but the more words that we know the meaning of that are less commonly used in everyday vocabulary. So we've got this, we've got these short sentences, as you can see. So, I'd be great at it. We've got I've in there as well, which is a contraction, which obviously shows us that this is quite informal because it's got that contraction of I have instead. Again, spelling mistakes obviously wouldn't really be in there, but if you can imagine, if you're writing an academic piece, you're definitely going to check your spellings, really, aren't you? And again, colloquial or slang language here, like I don't wanna, everyone knows what wanna means, but again, realistically, it should be want to. So this is going very, very informal in regards to this. Again, exclamation marks are something in regards to our grammar and punctuation. So when we are doing kind of writing about informal kind of pieces, we will, the use of exclamations is very much an informal thing as well. Rhetorical questions, absolutely fine. That can be, that tends to be more of a formal aspect in all fairness. Can be informal though, obviously. But exclamations tend to be just for the more informal pieces. Again, we could, if we were analysing this as a letter as well, it's certain words, cheers, again, it's a salutation, it's a sign-off, but it is a common sign-off. It's a common kind of colloquialism there. Okay, so a couple of ideas then. So if we were to make, if you were thinking, I'm writing a letter, and again, this falls more into our writing category, but if we were writing something and we were like, I want it, I know I'm writing to a boss or I'm doing this part of the assessment, it needs to be written formally. A few ideas of how you can make things more formal. So I'm writing to ask, we could change this to, I'm writing to inquire. So it's just changing some of the more common words and just thinking a bit more out of the box of other words that can perform the same action. So acting like a bit of a thesaurus in this case. Let you know. So like, okay, yeah, I'll let you know. Comes across as quite informal. So instead of that, we could use, instead of let you know, it could be inform. So I will inform you of this. If you want to ask for something, instead we could request it. So again, I would like to request a meeting as soon as possible so I can inform you of this development. Little words like this that can be really, really useful. Instead of signing off as well, so if we did have a salutation, if we were writing a letter or an email, instead of bye, it could be yours faithfully, yours sincerely, kind regards, things like this. So little things, I'm sure we've seen these before, but when we are when we are thinking about being more formal, these are a couple of aspects of where we can do it. Just look at you can still write the information as you would, but then we want to go through and just change a couple of the words in. Okay, so what does this look like in the exam then? That's what we need to really kind of get round to. So in the exam, what we've got here then is an example question straight from one of the exams. And this question will always pop up. And again, you can see there which two of these quotations. I keep drawing attention to that because it is a fact of a lot of people will drop 2 or 3 marks because they will see questions like this and they'll just tick one box. Make sure you tick 2. Even if you only think you know one answer, have a guess at the other. What I want you to do, have a quick read of these then, and see if you can work out which of these two are the examples of formal language. And do read these questions carefully, because sometimes they ask for formal, sometimes they ask for informal. So little things that can kind of cost us a couple of marks there. So have a quick go at this. Pop me over the answers when you think you can spot the two that are formal here. And again, what might help is obviously process of elimination. So look at each one and think, which ones of these can I obviously, go through and just kind of put maybe formal, informal, formal, formal, however it might fall there. So Monica, I would say for both of them that they would be, so for the first two that you've put there, I would say they would both be more informal. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, so what you've got there is absolutely fine. So your correction there is absolutely fine. So again, process of elimination can really help with this. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. No problem. I like that. It's like, I made a mistake. It's fine. You can always correct it. So no problem there. So we'll just give other people just a minute to have a look at this one. And then we'll go through and kind of chat through it. One thing that does really help with this as well is if you are struggling to kind of actually work out, is it formal, is it informal? What you can do is kind of imagine where you would see this kind of piece written. The nice thing is you don't really need the context of the writing behind this to just identify whether this small section is formal or informal. So one thing that I'd imagine is, have a look at each piece of writing and just think, could I imagine that in like a formal publication? Like, is that wording, if I was emailing my boss, would I use that wording? You put yourself in the situation, it can help a little bit as well. Okay, so for this one here then, what we are looking at is if we're looking for the formal and informal, we can go through and obviously identify these as formal or informal. And again, process of elimination is really useful. I definitely recommend it. You've got the time to do it. Hang on in there. Well, that sounds pretty informal to me. It's a bit, it's slang. I wouldn't imagine that, if I was talking to my boss or if I was reading a newspaper, I wouldn't really expect to see that. All your possessions. Again, at the moment, I've got no reason to think it's informal. Possessions is a less frequently seen word other than like stuff, for instance. So I'm going to put that as formal because I can't see any reason why it's not informal. So fork out any cash. So again, to fork out is that's our slang, our kind of colloquial language there. So this is going to be informal. Again, I wouldn't message my boss saying that. Additional questions. When I think of that, Are there any additional questions? I think of, maybe a lecturer with a monocle on talking. I quite clearly see that is going to be formal. Again, it's definitely not informal. So again, this kind of way up of the two definitely helps. Ask your best mate. Again, best mate is a bit of an informal kind of bit of language there. Again, mate as opposed to friend or companion, something like this. So let's have a look at one more of these then. So again, we've got another question here. So we've got, which two of these quotations from text A are examples of formal language? So again, we're looking for the formal language here. So let's have a look. And these questions are pretty much identical for level 1 and level 2. The only thing is with the level 2 questions, that they might be a little bit harder than spot, but really they're testing the same skills. So it's nothing to worry about. Any ideas here then? So which two of these do we think are the formal ones? And again, use that process of elimination. Or if you can spot one that is informal, then you can always have a bit of a look there and just go, okay, well, that one is going to be a more informal idea there. Monica, absolutely brilliant. I'd completely agree there. Again, we'll just give other people just a minute or so. So if you want to contribute and you want to obviously put your answer across, absolutely fine. And then we'll go through and obviously reveal the answers in just a second. Okay, I'm liking that one there. So like a full list of the ones that are kind of informal and formal there. So Andrew, that's absolutely brilliant. I think we differ on one or two, but let's have a bit of a look. So if we have a look at question, or our first one here then. So again, process of elimination, really, really useful skill here. So let's have a look. Okay to be anxious during your test. That's quite a tough one. Anxious is a word that we don't see that frequently. It could be quite a formal kind of language. But the thing here is going to be this, the use of okay. It's quite an informal way of asking people how they're doing. It's, that would tell me that it leans more towards informal than formal. But I'd probably be on the fence with this one. I'd probably put a pin in that and maybe come back to it later. Simulates the test experience. Well, I'm going to put that one as formal. There's nothing in there that indicates it's informal. And again, use of the word simulates, experience, quite nice kind of formal words there. There's no contractions in there. There's no personalization. So it ticks all the boxes to be formal, nothing suggesting informal. So we'll go with that. On the date of your test. Now again, for here, I'd probably be on the fence a little bit as well, because, there's nothing really there that makes it scream that it's very formal, but there's also nothing that indicates informal. So in this kind of case, I would therefore lean more towards formal than informal. We can have things that are formal, but not excessively formal. But when we say informal, we mean that there is something definitely there that highlights it. There's no contractions there. There's no personal kind of use, and there's no slang or colloquialisms. It's just average words, really. It's not the most formal piece, but I'd say it leans more towards formal than informal. How to ditch those L plates? Well, we know this straight away. You know, if we're ditching something, that is a slang terminology for getting rid of. So that is going to be informal. A warm up for the real thing. So again, not the most informal thing we've ever seen, but it's definitely more informal than formal. Warm up, again, is quite like an informal terminology there. So if I now look back at this, I would probably then, process of elimination, I might still be on the fence about this one, but I'd probably think, well, out of these three, which two are the most formal? I'm very happy with this one. If I were to compare between on the date of your test or okay to be anxious during your test, it might be a tough decision. I'd probably go with this one just based on the fact it's that okay that really kind of sways me away from this idea. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a recap then, and then we can get moving on to our assessment. So if we were to have a look at this, and so why do we use formal language then? Yeah, I completely agree. This one kind of stands out quite nicely, doesn't it? So it's going to be B here. Yeah, why do we use this formal language? It's not really to convey fun, obviously, to tell a story. We're not really reading a narrative or to request things. Technically, we could use it to request things, but it's not all the time used to request things. It is, always used in a more serious manner, though. So B is the best answer there. So which features might we see in formal language? Yeah, Monica, I'd agree with that. We'll just give other people just a minute, see if anyone else wants to contribute. So yeah, for this one here, then we are going to say this is an impersonal. It's impersonal language, which is the the biggest giveaway of formal language here. Again, it doesn't always have to be impersonal. You can use a personal approach, but it's less common. Emotional language tends to be used more in our informal language, but not strictly so. Simple sentences, that is something that we do commonly see in informal language, and contractions are always in informal language and they're never in formal language. So the best answer here is, again, going to be our impersonal language there. So why do we use informal language and where might we see it? So informal language, out of these, we'd probably see this more in a magazine article about a celebrity. It's still an article, which always tends to sound like it's going to be quite formal. But again, if it's a magazine article and it's talking about a celebrity, it's going to use more informal language in there to address the target audience, which is the general population, which is more of an informal group. If I was writing something, if I was writing a science report, I would write it very scientifically, very academically, very formally. The same, a newspaper report about the death of the Prime Minister. You're not going to be like, oh, I can't believe it, he snuffed it. That's not really going to cut it, is it? Okay. So what we need to do now then is have a look at our assessment. So the main thing is, like, following on from here then, so there is the assessment for this specific topic that we can now complete. And there are some practice worksheets available if you want to go through them there. So hopefully now we're all very happy with our formal and informal language or tone, and we're happy to obviously complete the assessment on this. So again, thank you very much for joining. I'm going to stop the recording at that point.